What is the best hero for each role in Predecessor? It's an interesting question and one we're going to answer in today's video. This is of course just my own opinion, and with Pred being such a young game, it's definitely possible things change rapidly with new patches, but I wanted to give my own thoughts on the topic. So without further ado, let's jump in with the top mid laner in Predecessor, which to probably no one's surprise is Countess. The newest hero on the block is making waves in multiple roles, but mostly as a mid laner. Countess is a magical ability-based assassin character with very high single target burst damage and mobility. That description alone would be a green flag to say that Countess is a very strong character. Mobility is pretty hard to come by in Pred, with only about half the cast, if not less, having a standard movement ability, and most of these are solo laners or junglers. Having a mid with such strong mobility is really powerful. Her passive grants her permanent magical lifesteal per hero kill up to 20% to keep her topped up on HP. Her 1 also heals her while damaging enemies around her. The healing versus heroes is 4 times, which is kind of insane. Shadow Slip is her mobility I was talking about before, where she leaps to a target, damages and slows them while leaving a shadow behind at her original location that she can TP back to within 4 seconds. This allows Countess to be ruthlessly aggressive while having a fallback, since she can TP out of the fight at any time after going in. She has a standard damage ability on her E, and then her deadly ultimate that is yet another leap that CCs the target before doing massive damage of both base and max health while healing half the damage the ult dealt to the target. So yeah, the combination of burst damage, mobility and healing makes Countess a threat to be taken very seriously in Predecessor, and she's showing up mostly as a mid laner at the current time. Moving on to jungle though, we have overall one of the strongest heroes in the game, that being Crunch. It's worth noting that Crunch is also a really amazing solo laner, but I have another pick in mind for the solo lane, so I'm putting Crunch in jungle for the list. What more really needs to be said of Crunch? I feel like most people who played Pred during launch week will know how fundamentally strong Crunch's abilities are. While he did take some damage nerfs in the most recent patch, taking down his numbers will only go so far, since his core design is just really strong in terms of CC chains, mobility and guaranteed damage. Crunch is very much an all-in style of hero who wants to get into the fight and dump his whole kit on someone before getting out or continuing. He has range problems due to his melee nature, but this is pretty easily remedied by his dash that stuns enemies hit for a short time, allowing free follow-ups if not cleansed. His Q does solid damage in front of him for wave clear and poke, while his E's empowered version is a 1.2 second knockup that can chain right off of his dash stun. And that's really what makes Crunch so strong. Once he gets on you, there's very little you can do about it due to his crazy CC chains. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, his ultimate lets you repeat your most recently used basic ability on a very low cooldown compared to other ultimates, so when combined with a bit of ability haste from items, it feels like Crunch always has a cooldown ready to be used. Combine this with the extra damage on his next basic attack after using an ability, and the heal from using every third ability on his ultimate, and you have a force to be reckoned with from jungle and solo too for that matter. Despite the nerfs, Crunch still remains fundamentally very strong. Speaking of solo though, let's cover that before we head over to the duo lane. My top pick for solo is none other than Steel, the literal highest win rate hero in the launch week according to devs. This guy is fundamentally strong for similar reasons to Crunch actually. Where Crunch is a disgusting CC chain bruiser with high mobility, Steel is a disgusting CC chain tank with high mobility. The guy has a stun, a knockback, a slow and a knockup / stun on his ultimate. His CC is some of the most disgusting in the entire game, and you need to buy the cleanse crests on squishies to deal with this guy straight up. Otherwise he will lock you into a CC chain where you're dead before it ends a lot of the time. His passive gives him a health shield every time you immobilize with an ability, which since literally every single ability he has immobilizes in some way, you get a shield for every ability cast, which is super nice for keeping yourself healthy and winning those long trades in solo lane. His right click is a shield bash that stuns, does max health damage, which is really nice in solo since many of the picks there build tank, and has a cooldown way lower than it realistically should be at just 8 seconds at max rank, which can of course go down with ability haste. His Q is a dash that goes a long distance, dealing damage and knocking back enemies, which is a great way to engage the fight and follow up with your stun. His E is a barrier that blocks all projectiles and damages and slows enemies that pass through it, making it not only hard to escape Steel, but also hard to poke him if you're reliant on projectiles like carries for example. With how strong carries are in the current meta, the fact that Steel can just place this barrier in front of the enemy carry and walk at them for free into his nasty CC chains and damage is kinda crazy. And finally we have Steel's ultimate, which is yet more mobility and CC. He leaps into the air and crashes down at the target location, stunning and knocking up for 1.5 seconds, which is a really long time in Pred. This one CC can kill your target if your carry is following up correctly with crit basic attacks. Overall, Steel's kit is just super busted as a frontline tank or even as a bruiser with some damage if you want to. Other than his shield bash, he does have longer cooldowns than most, but if you can work around that, he's one of the deadliest tanks in Predecessor. But moving into duo lane now, we'll start with the best carry, who is somewhat hard to choose since all carries can be strong due to their basic attacks doing most of the work with broken crit items. But overall, I think Drongo is the strongest carry at the moment. As I mentioned, carries use strong items and their basic attacks are all the same, so having abilities that either keep you safe or enhance your basic attacks are key to a strong carry. Drongo has both those things. His passive makes his crits apply a bleed, dealing max health damage, which is great for shredding tanks, while also making his abilities deal more damage based on his crit chance. And since crit items are broken right now and it's very easy to get at or near 100% crit chance by late game, this passive is super strong at the moment. His right click is a boomerang that deals damage and slows on hit. This isn't anything special, but it does help with poke and wave clear in the early laning phase and allows him to stick to people while basic attacking a little bit better in the late game due to its slow on hit. His Q is a grenade that silences enemies in the area and lasts 3 seconds. This is deceptively good as many abilities in Predecessor are channeled but don't have CC immunity on them, and so throwing this on reaction to a Narbash ult for example is a great way to counter it and keep yourself safe. The passive wasn't the only thing that helps his basic attacks though, as he also has Rad Rounds, which is a steroid that lasts 3 seconds and irradiates enemies hit by his basic attacks. After the duration expires, the enemy takes burst damage depending on how many stacks of Rad they had on them for some huge burst damage when you have high attack speed in the late game and can land several shots in those 3 seconds. This has secured me so many kills when playing as Drongo when the enemy gets away on like 5 to 10% health and just dies to the Rads. And finally, we have the ultimate, which deals damage, shreds enemy armor by 35% for 8 seconds. That's just crazy in itself and allows Drongo to absolutely delete tanks, as well as pushing enemies away and launching Drongo himself backwards, adding to his already strong safety. If an enemy dives on you, you just press this ultimate on them and you're pretty much safe. Drongo basically has everything you need in a carry. Strong basic attack augments, crit abuse, and safety late game. With some added benefits like very strong tank shred and hard countering certain picks like Gideon or Narbash with his silence. Definitely a top carry right now, and in my opinion, the absolute best in the role. And finally, we have support. So while I'd love to put my boy Narbash here, as I think he's being underrated by people at the moment, I just have to put Riktor as the best support. He's too good right now. He can also play off lane, but is best utilized as a support in my opinion, and I wanted solo lane to be Steel. He has a passive shield that accumulates over time and also when using his ultimate, helping with poke he would take from carries in the laning phase. His right click is one of the strongest abilities in the game, period. It's a pull that deals solid damage plus max health damage and pulls enemies towards him from pretty insane range. This can be a bit hard to land, but is very deadly even on its own in the late game if your mid and or carry follow up with their damage. But he also has his Q as a follow-up silence that prevents enemies from leaping or teleporting back to safety after the pull, as well as his ultimate which completes the deadly CC combo by stunning all enemies in front of him for 1.5 seconds, and dealing great damage to boot. This CC chain has killed me even as a tank in the late game because if you get pulled out of position then stuck in place for 1.5 seconds while his team wail on you, you're pretty much dead. Riktor is definitely a more aggressive support than the likes of Muriel or Narbash, but you can utilize this CC to peel for backliners by ulting enemies that dive in. Super strong support right now, but as I said, a good solo laner as well. And quickly before we end off the video, I have a few honourable mentions. For jungle, I think Chimera and Grux are both really strong basic attackers right now, but just not quite as good as Grunch. Gideon is just a really strong all-round mid laner with great damage from a safe range and a blink to keep him safe in fights. And finally, Rampage has some of the strongest dive potential of any character in the game when his ult is active. But that's all I've got for the best character in each role for Predecessor, plus some honourable mentions. As I mentioned at the start of the video, the game is young and not only are people still discovering new strats and what's powerful, but the game is also being patched pretty frequently, and this video is for the 0.2 patch. So if there are any more updates out by the time you watch this, things could have changed. Though if major changes happen to the meta, I will try and update this series going forward. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.